compact version. You'll see.
Okay, thanks, Bruce.
Okay. All right, guys. How did you feel about yesterday's show? It was a good review.
Yeah, excellent. Good, thank you.
All right. So let me just see where we are. Okay, we're in 15A3. All right. Let me just see this. Fine. 15A3. So I'm going to start at the bottom of the left page. The Gemara attempts to prove from another Mishnah that half damages are compensation and not a penalty. So now we've gone through the two different cases of Rav Papa, who've used the tam payment as compensation, and Rav Huna, the son of Yeshua, says that the tam payment is a penalty. We discussed the reasons why. As far as muad is concerned, everybody agrees it's compensation. Does everybody know why it's agreed that it's compensation? Guys, did you do your homework?
Yeah, because it can't be a penalty.
Why?
A penalty with half payment, with muad, it can be a penalty because of the fact that you're penalizing the guy to be more responsible.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, let me rephrase the question, okay? What I'm saying is, with regards to a muad ox, okay? When you're paying the full amount with a muad ox, we view it as a compensation, not a penalty. Why?
No. I understood the question. I just obviously don't know the answer.
I think the animal is by rights. It's a guarded aspect. I think it has to do with the fact that the animal is by nature wouldn't do that normally, and therefore, am I not on the right track?
No. All right. So let me just give you guys a little bit of a clue here. What makes? Let me ask the question the other way around. What makes a penalty a penalty? There are three factors. What are the three factors, guys?
Illegal, deliberate behavior.
What do you say? Sorry?
What three factors? What did you say?
Illegal, deliberate behavior, deliberate illegal behavior. Personal lesson for not to do it. That's a penalty.
Well, what I'm asking is something different. What you're saying is culpability with regard to the behavior of what makes an ox a muad. So Kevin's answer is that the definition of a muad is a owner that has been warned because this animal is a habitual gorer. So that is a good definition of what a muad is, because it's been the animal's been forewarned because it's done 3 times of the offense. But what we're asking here is what constitutes a penalty? What does a penalty mean? So, Kevin's answer was with regards to a muad. What makes a muad is that the ox is a habitual gorer more than 3 times and the owner's been warned. But I'm asking a different question. So I'm going to put you guys out of your misery, and I will just let you know what makes... How do you recognize that something is a penalty in the Gemara? So rule number 1, anything by your own admittance before witnesses come along. If you say this is what I did, and then the Beis Din exonerates you, basically don't worry. I mean, at the hands of heaven, you're still going to have a level of conscientiousness and apology, etc. But you're off the hook with the penalty if you admit it before witnesses come. And we learned this with regards to a thief. If a thief will come to admit before their witnesses, etc., he doesn't have to pay the double payment. Remember that. Because the compensation is the amount he stole, and that extra duplication of a compensation. In other words, he stole 100 zuz. He pays back 200 zuz. 100 zuz is the compensation, 100 zuz is the penalty. If by own admittance before there were witnesses that come against him, he said he did wrong, he only has to pay back a compensation for what he stole. The reason why there is a penalty is to deter somebody. Because again, if somebody stole 100, the worst of it is that they have to pay back what they stole. There's no losing point for somebody without that mindset. Does that make sense? Arth, you're quite static. Have we all frozen?
Me?
Yeah.
We're losing you a bit, but...
Okay. Have you lost me?
I'll move around with you. No, I'm just sitting still.
Okay, that's fine. So again, if by your admittance you don't have to pay it, it's known as a penalty. There's a separate factor that is considered a penalty, and that is when the amount is fixed. Okay? We learned the case of a defamer that accused his wife that he just married after consummating the relationship that she wasn't a virgin. Remember that there was a penalty payment and it was a fixed amount. In the case of rape and a seducer, there's a fixed amount. Now, that fixed amount penalty is in addition to all the other payments you make. Remember, we learned that you have to pay for, if you injure a person, for the medical injuries, that the shevet, the recovery, the ability, the loss of sustained income from not just the recovery period, but what they were able to do before the injury to what they're worth now because of their loss of injury, the difference on what they would receive on the slave market. In other words, that deficiency that you now cost them, how's that going to affect them? For a woman that's been raped, the humiliation and the pain, etc. So there's pain, there's medical bills, etc. The penalty is in addition to this particular sort of factor. So it doesn't take away compensation. It's often in addition. So whenever there's a fixed amount, that would prove it. So one of the cases that would prove it in this particular issue is that if your ox killed a Canaanite slave, you pay the owner of the slave. What did we say? You pay the owner of the slave 30 shekels. Now, you pay the slave owner 30 shekels for destroying his property, whether the slave was worth 1 dinar or 2 shekels. You pay 30 shekels. And the very fact that you can pay more than that slave is worth is indicative of the fact that it's a penalty. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Fine.
Basically, a penalty is just...
it's a deterrent.
Whatever it is, plus something else. A deterrent. Okay.
Yeah, it's a deterrent. So that can be worth more than the damage. Again, we said yesterday with New York, with Giuliani, that the cost of littering on your penalty for leaving litter far surpassed the penalty what that litter would have cost you to pick up. Okay, it's a deterrent. So number 2, a penalty is fixed. The first one, by your own admission, you don't pay. The second one, the penalty is fixed. And then the third aspect, it can be more than the amount damaged. And we learned it in this particular case with the slave. Okay, so now that you've got this particular discussion, it's going to make a little bit more contextual sense. So the Gemara attempts to prove from another Mishnah that half damages are compensation, not a penalty. Okay? 15a3. Come learn the proof from the following Mishnah. What is the difference in law between a tam and a muad? It is that in the case of a tam, one pays half damages only from the body of the animal. So look, there's 2 leniencies, guys. What are those 2 leniencies? The 2 leniencies are that you pay half payment, and the second leniency is that you pay from the gufa of the animal, the body of the animal. Does that make sense? Those are the 2 leniencies. Whereas in the case of muad, one pays full damages from his choice property. So that's what it says in 15a3. Now, the Gemara is going to pose a question. Now, if it is true that the payment of half damages is a penalty, let the Mishnah teach the following difference as well. In the case of a tam, one does not pay on the basis of his own admission, whereas in the case of a muad, one does pay on the basis of his own admission. So when you first read this, it seems confusing, but again, you have to keep in mind the broader context. This next section of the Gemara is trying to prove from another Mishnah that half damages are compensation. So what's its evidence here? Its evidence is the fact that it says, look, how do we prove that half damages are compensation and not a penalty? Because it should have turned around and said that in the case of tam, that if you come and admit to the fact that, listen, my ox did damage such and such as person ox, that you don't have to pay on the basis of the admission. Does that make sense? But because it didn't mention it here, it's saying that this is how we come to maybe see that, in fact, tam damages are compensation. So it's trying to get evidence for each case. So right now, who's it trying to get evidence for? Rav Papa, Rav Huna ben Yeshua. Who's it trying to get evidence for? Guys?
Rav Papa.
Exactly. Why? Because Rav Papa is saying that half damages are compensation. So it's saying, yes, half damages are compensation because what it's saying here is, listen, there's two leniencies with tam. The leniency is that you pay half damages from the gufa of the animal because the animal is tame. And if it was a penalty, the Gemara should have mentioned that if by your own admission, before there were witnesses, you don't have to pay the tam payment. But the fact that it didn't mention it, it would appear to seem as though it's compensation. Does that make sense? Because of the omission of that statement in the Gemara.
Yeah, no, you cleared it up. Thank you.
Again, Marco, again, if I'm trying to prove that it's a penalty, I would have a statement saying, this is what the Gemara is proposing, saying, listen, if you come by your own admission before there are witnesses with this tam payment, you don't have to pay. The fact that there's no such statement, it's implying that maybe it's compensation. Does that make sense? Fine.
I understand that, yes.
Okay. So the Gemara rejects this proof. It says, the Tana taught only some of the differences between tam and muad and left out others. Thus, his failure to list this one is not proof of anything. So what are we talking about here of a list that's left out and added, etc.? Now, do you remember when we began the daf, we were talking about different listings of damages by Rav Oshaya and Rav Chisda. Do you remember Rav Chisda?
Yeah.
Okay. So, guys, remember it says Rav Chisda left out two. Shamoth, you look sore. You okay?
Yeah, no, I'm sore.
Shame, man. So, what it's basically saying is, do you remember when it said what were the two cases that Rav Chisda left out? Do you remember ages ago it said this? So, what happens is a Gemara has a list. So, if it's saying that there's a list, it means that there are things that are left out of a list. If I say to you, here's a shopping list, it means that if I'm giving you a list of what to buy, what is the implication? There's certain things you mustn't buy. Am I right or wrong? The list is inclusive. It's including things that are written down on a list. It's excluding things that are not on the list. Okay, so this is the principle. Whenever I say there's a list, it's saying these are the parts but it's not part of the whole. It's not everything in the pantry. It's the things that are missing from the pantry I want you to purchase. So there's a rule in the Gemara that if there's one thing missing from the list, it adds things. It adds it. It just adds it. If there's one thing missing, it'll add it to the total. But if there's more than one thing missing, it will state, it will only give you the version of a list if there's more than one thing missing, to show you that there's a vacuum of certain things not mentioned. Does that make sense? That's a Talmudic principle. Guys, you all seem not completely with it today.
I'm fine.
Okay, but then I need a bit of response. I need to know, do you understand? Do you not understand? Because what I want to do is I want to fly through it. I've got it, but I want to know you got it.
I understand. It's not sort of getting the principle, but I was trying to see where you're going to.
All right, so what it's saying here is, but you have to understand the principle before you know where we're going here. It's saying, listen, why didn't it seem to have left out this fact that if somebody plays the tum by their own admission, it's seeming to indicate it's compensation, not a penalty. Because if it added that fact, that by his own admission he doesn't pay, then it indicates a penalty. The fact that it's omitted seems to be compensation. And the Gemara is turning around and says it's not proof of anything because there's something else that was omitted. And the minute we know there's more than one thing omitted, it means that that thing that was omitted is not significant because there are a whole lot of things that are omitted. So that's not enough to prove the case that a tum is not a penalty. Does that make sense? All right, let me move on. So the Gemara rejects the proof. The Tana taught only some of the differences between tum and muad and left out the others. Thus, his failure to list this one is not proof of anything. So the Gemara questions this answer. What else did the Tana leave out that you may justifiably claim that he left out this difference as well? So from this we can infer the following. Firstly, that a full payment muad is considered compensation. Why? For one principle, is that if I damaged Kevin's ox and his ox was worth 200 zuz and my ox was muad and a habitual gora and I'd be warned, I'd have to pay Kevin the 200 zuz. Therefore, it's not a penalty. I'm compensating him for his loss because his entire loss was 200 zuz. I'm paying 200 zuz. Therefore, I've compensated Kevin for his loss. If I'm paying,
I understand this, but why the hell did they go and twist all these things around? I don't appreciate that all this kind of twisting it around the whole time, but looking at it from so many different angles and coming up with all these principles and keep it simple. At the beginning you said, okay, the guys gets 3 chances, and the 2 chances, and he's more than the third. No, fine. Well, it's a mind. It's a mind.
I get the frustration. I
understand what you're saying. I can understand what you're saying. It's like, fine. But okay, you can look at everything from those kind of angles. If you want to say, yes, the guy is the guy, if the guy was warned, etc., and he is in a muad situation, and that's the way it's supposed to be, then yes, it can be seen as compensation because that's what he has to pay. Fine. It's just, sorry, I'm just frustrated.
No, listen, I'm frustrated by it as well because coming from a secular background, I just feel, kind of give me a list of rules, tell me what I can do, put the principles, and this backwards and forwards of mental gymnastics sometimes feels very frustrating. So I'm with you. All I'm doing is I'm trying to explain something that's overly complicated in a step-by-step process. So all they're saying here, Michael, in a convoluted way, is that any time it matches the damage, it's compensation. That's the way I understood it in Damon language. Yes. Why it's going backwards and forwards, who knows? Okay? So I share your frustration. Don't think that I'm adding to it. Okay.
Yeah.
I get it. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm trying. Okay. So all it's saying is that when you understand that a muad is always compensation, because again, you're not trying to pay less or more than the actual damage. In that case, a muad is compensation. What it wants to know is penalty. Tum. Is tum considered half a compensation because the ox was tame? Or is it considered a penalty because you shouldn't have to pay it all because the ox is tame? That's the only thing it's trying to derive. So it says, listen, if it was seen as a penalty, it should have turned around and said, well, you don't pay by your own admission. The fact that it doesn't, it assumes that it's compensation for the tum. Fine. Then it would go according to Rav Papa. So it's saying that that's a proof. And the Gemara is just responding and saying it's not a proof. Because the Tana didn't just leave out that thing. Because if it left out just that thing, you could say that that's evidence to support your argument that it's a compensation, not a penalty. So it's saying, okay, so what else did it leave? It left out the payment of half kofar in the case of a tam. In other words, the rule that when a tam kills a person, the owner does not even pay half kofar, whereas in the case of muad, the owner pays full kofar payment. Okay. So we learned this about the kofar payment in the Gemara. Remember when we did 4a? It's in note 21, guys. Okay, so it's basically when your ox kills a person, you pay a kofar payment. Now, that's only for if that's not for damage. That's for if your ox kills a man or a woman. Fine. The Gemara rejects this answer because what the Gemara is saying is as follows. So it firstly answers that, listen, it didn't just leave this case of out the difference between tam and muad by its own admission, meaning that it's proof for a penalty. It says it also mentioned left out the half kofar payment of a tam. So we're saying, hang on, what are you talking about? It left out the half kofar payment for a tam. We learned that there's only kofar for a muad animal, because according to what we've learned so far, if that the animal is dangerous and it's been warned and now it's killed a person, you're responsible in Shemaim because this wasn't a tame animal. You'd been warned repeatedly. So therefore you've got blood on your hands and you are responsible for that person's blood. So we're saying, what are you talking about? It also left that out in the case of tam. And it left out more than one article. This doesn't prove your fact. It still could mean that tam is compensation because it didn't mention that by your own admission that there's that you get off the hook. So just to say that this is another part that's left out, you didn't leave it out because we don't pay kofar payment for tam. So what are you talking about? So that's how the Mishnah retorts. Okay, so this is the principle here. It's because of the omission of the half kofar that you maintain that the Mishnah's list is incomplete. That is not evidence of something left out. For who is the Tana of this Mishnah? It is Rav Yosef Haglili, who states that a tam pays half kofar. Okay, so let's just get this straight. The rabbis turn around and say that there's no half kofar payment for a tam ox at all. Is that a kofar is when you have blood on your hands because you know this ox is a Bechagora, and therefore you should be responsible for losing your life because you were responsible for killing the person at the hands of heaven. And this kofar payment is going to cost you plenty, and it goes to the heirs. Okay. So there's a discussion, by the way, in terms of the kofar payment, which is interesting. Is the kofar payment on the injured or the injurer? So you're saying, obviously, I could understand if it's on the injured party because it's on their worth and it goes to the heirs. But why would it be on the damager? Because, again, there's also other payments of compensation that go to the heirs. So the reason why it could be the case of the damager, Rabbi Cohen said, is because the damager should lose his life as a result of his negligence. That's how culpable he is. And therefore, he pays the value of his life to give him a conscientiousness that he should have lost his life and the death penalty over this. It's only because it's indirect that he never lost his life. But heaven holds him that responsible. So it's saying here that for tam, where the animal's tame, you pay no payment of kofar according to the rabbis. Does that make sense? There's no payment of tam. Rav Yossi Haglili says that there is a kofar payment of half for a tam. Why does he say that there's a half a kofar payment for a tam? Because just like there would be, for example, a penalty or half compensation, because had you been watching your ox carefully, even if it was tame, it never would have happened. Had you watched your ox carefully, it never would have killed. Does that make sense, Michael?
Yeah.
So he's saying, not like the rabbis, that there is a half payment for a kofir payment, and the rabbis are saying that there's no half payment for tam if an ox kills somebody. So we're saying that this Mishnah is going according to Rav Yossi Haglili. So therefore, there was nothing left out of the Mishnah. So then the question reverts itself, well, hang on, if there was nothing else left out, then what about this issue that it has to be almost analyzed as a compensation payment? Because if it had turned around and said he doesn't pay by his own admission, that implies it's a penalty. The fact that it left it out means that the half payment is considered compensation. So Michael's question is, well, why are we going backwards and forwards with this? It's mental gymnastics. So obviously it had certain halachic implications. So let me just give you one halachic implication, Michael, and one spiritual implication. This might help remove some of the irritation. Can you see me? Okay. So one of the reasons is there might be financial considerations that differ from the of what you would pay for the for both the ox and the heirs of the deceased, etc., whether it's regards to a penalty or compensation. There might be halachic constraints. You might, for example, in a case where the ox, where you held responsible, you might be shunned by the community. At the hands of heaven, they might hold you more responsible. There might be financial implications. So the difference between a tam with regards to compensation and penalty would view the way Hashem views you, the community views you, and maybe financial implications. So it's not just an academic exercise. We're just not living in that society to know how it's going to impact. That's all. All right. Let me just, I hope that puts you a little bit at ease. Okay. So now we're on 15a4. And we said that according to Rav Yosef HaGalili, a tam pays basically half the kofir, and for a muad a full kofir. Okay. But the Gemara attempts a proof from another Mishnah, which teaches that the law that a person does not pay a penalty based on his own admission. Okay? So, come learn a proof from this Mishnah. Okay? And we're on 15b1. Just want to go through one particular note here. My screen's freezing. Sorry, guys. One who says my ox killed so-and-so, or one who says my ox killed so-and-so's ox, this person pays on the basis of his own admission. Would you not say that the Mishnah refers here to tam and the payment of half damages? Thus, we can see that half damages are considered compensation, since one pays them even of his own admission. So it's saying that, fine, if you want to go the opinion of Rav Yosef HaGalili that says that for a kofir payment you pay half damages, and you say my ox killed so-and-so, and then for tam, my ox killed so-and-so's ox, you would pay half damages, it would seem to reflect that it's compensation, because nowhere does it say that a person is off the hook and you still pay by your own admission. So that's what it's coming to propose to the Gemara. So the Gemara answers no. The Mishnah refers to a muad and the payment of full damages, which is certainly compensation. So then the Gemara wants to reassert the question. It says, in the case of a tam, what would be the law? Would you say that indeed he does not pay on the basis of his own admission, because half damages are penalty payment? If so, then rather let the last part of the Mishnah teach the following distinction of a case. So this is what it's going to say. It says, basically, if my ox killed so-and-so slave does not pay on his own admission, and let the Mishnah differentiate and teach that the difference with respect to the first case itself as follows. With what was this in regard to a muad for which damages are a compensation? But in the case of tam, he does not pay on the basis of his own admission because half damages are penalty. Let me just, guys, I'm having a bit of a problem with my screen that's going in and out. So do you follow or do you not follow? If you don't follow, you can ask.
I follow. I mean, it's just shifting the barriers every time. It's just shifting it, and I can't explain it. I know what you're saying.
No.
It's, and it's just going one up or one. It depends. It depends on the viewpoint. Depends on where you stopped, and then. Okay, I can't explain it, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I can understand that at the moment you're feeling a hell of a lot of frustration because you just want to say, like, you're going here, you're going there, you're going there, you're going there with the definition. This mental gymnastics is getting to the point of slight frustration, and you just want to know what's going on already. So I'm going to just put it.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just wondering why the hell we're doing this. I'm sorry. I understand what you're saying. I probably appreciate why we're doing it at some point, but I suppose this is the way they think. Okay.
All right. Well, look. Thank God there's spiritual reward for this.
Okay. No, he's God.
Okay. So, all right. So,
but just to answer Richard, Marco, sorry, a little bit, is that the reason. What happens in a Gemara is that they bring in other opinions and other rabbis and all of that, and that's why you have this mental gymnastics, because they're bringing in other sources, and that's the problem. That's what makes
it's like such a Jewish thing. They're like, it's like, these guys study, and then they over argue it. They're like. They shift the goalpost a little bit, and then they look at it from. Look, I'm just obviously not. I don't have a good moral mind to appreciate it so deeply. But yes, I get it. But it, anyway,
All right, listen, we've got a couple of minutes left, guys. I just want to cover a little bit of ground, Kabb. Just give me a fraction of a sec. So, all right, listen, let me just summarize one or two aspects because this is going backwards and forwards. So the first aspect I want to say is that when the Gemara says, my ox killed so-and-so, okay, when it refers to a Canaanite slave here, because it's saying my ox killed so-and-so slaves does not pay on his own admission. What it's saying here is as follows, is it didn't understand why it didn't state it like this. Why? Because what is the penalty for killing a slave? It's 30 shekels. Right. So what it's saying is that the very fact of it is you pay that amount, whether the Canaanite slave was worth only a dinar, according to Rashi, or it's worth 10 shekels or whatever it's worth, you pay 30 shekels. And the fact that you pay 30 shekels, which could be worth more than the value of the slave, implies that it's a penalty. And it says, why didn't it also say, my ox killed so-and-so slave does not pay in his own admission, which is the second criteria of it being a penalty. Meaning that if he doesn't pay on his own admission, it means it's a penalty. If he does pay whether he admitted it or not, it's a compensation. So the Gemara is feeling Marco's frustration now, by the way, and it's saying, listen, I don't understand why you're not clear in your text. It's actually sharing Marco's pain here. It's turning around and saying, listen, you're going backwards and you're going forwards and you're going backwards. Why didn't you state it straightforward? Because now when we're asking your question, is it a penalty? You say, no, it's talking about a muad ox. So then say it's a muad ox. So in other words, if it's the case that it's different rabbis arguing from different points of time, Gavin's right. But then what should happen is it should be a little bit clearer. That's what the Gemara say. It's saying if you're talking about a particular case of a kofeh payment and half kofeh, and the default position is muad, state it all. And then why don't you just revert to the statement and said, my ox killed so-and-so slave, and I don't pay by my own admission. That would clear up the case perfectly. To turn around and say what? It implies now it's a penalty for two reasons. You're paying more than the slave is worth. It could be equal, but you're certainly paying more in certain cases. It's a fixed amount, and you don't have to pay by your own admission. If you just made the statement like that, that's what the Gemara is saying, we wouldn't be going backwards and forwards. So it's actually sharing Michael's frustration here. So the Gemara answers, the entire Mishnah speaks of a muad ox. So in other words, it doesn't have to state this. So if it's talking about a muad ox, that there could be a case that the kofeh payment is a penalty, but it doesn't mean that that there's not a compensatory amount within the muad ox, meaning compensation you pay for the death of the person, and then you pay the penalty because you should have paid by your life because that ox was forewarned, etc. So they're saying the one doesn't necessarily negate the other. And we're going to see how it proceeds tomorrow. But Marco, I'll share your aggravation.
No, thanks. It's still enjoyable. It's enjoyable. It's great. I'm just.
I get it. I get it. Like just. Yeah. Today's a special day because it's Marco's father's yahrzeit. Okay, and I'm just.
Thank you, guys.
Laugh, Marco. I really do.
Thanks. Thank you.
I'm going to share the screen just to show you what I've. So that you can just get a bit of a sense.
Can you allow us to record? I think this should be recorded.
That is recording.
It is recording.
Okay, I think it's recorded. That's working.
Okay, just hang on. Can you see?
Yeah, it's my dad's not the rabbi. He's the guy in the back.
So, Marco, I wanted, obviously, this year to be... What is it, Gavin?
No. I'm just kidding around with Marco.
All right.
It's fun. Carry on.
All right, this is serious, Gavin. It's actually a serious dedication.
Shame. Yeah.
So I just wanted you to give us a bit of an indication, and whoever's going to listen to this part of the shir, which we'll have it... I'll tell you why I want it separate. Because I want an unedited version with the Mishnayos for your dad and the Mishnah Brura separate to the Gemara shir. So if you want to send it to any of your family members or something, you've got a very short shir for them, and then we'll have one edited version of a longer one joined with the Gemara shir. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I know a few people will watch it. Thank you so much.
Exactly, but they don't want to... go through the whole Gemara shir. So if you can just kindly, before we do the dedication, let us know a little bit about your dad.
Sure. How long have I got? I mean, I just don't want to ramble on. A couple of minutes.
Sure.
So look, I can't give you obviously I won't have time to give you a full history of my dad, other than the fact that he was like all our sort of ancestors who came from Russia or Lithuania. His father came from Lithuania and was a general dealer and went up and down in the country and settled in Matatiela. My dad went to DHS, the boarding school, which he loved, which was, he says, the best days of his life. And he went to all the alumni gatherings for years and years and years thereafter. He was a very, very, very good sportsman. So he played first rugby for DHS, and he was, anyway, I'd rather talk more about him as a person, but other than the fact that he was a really good sportsman. But, he was part of the old school, where, just solid values, which we kind of sort of miss today. He really cared about people. He genuinely cared. And when I say cared, he was a pharmacist by profession. And, if someone was ill, he would make a point of not just finding out how they were. He would know what was wrong with them. He was like a warrior. He would know what was wrong with them, and he would have a Merck manual, and he would look up stuff, and he would find out what was going on with them, and he would phone them every day and see what medicines they were taking. He was almost funny, and being in one's face. So for example, my ex-wife, he would be interested to know how stomach wasn't working properly or something like that. He would intrude and say, and make suggestions and that. He was just a caring, loving, straightforward, just open deck of cards, nice guy, just caring, nice guy, just a good, caring man. And I miss him terribly. He was sick for a while, but he was sick for quite a long time. And when he died, there's always a little sense of relief, and in time it really hits one as to what one misses. And as time gets on, I miss him more. I miss him terribly. It's terrible. It's terrible losing a parent. I never realized that it would be so tough. And anyway, I just appreciate that we're doing this today, and that I'm in a position now to do it with you guys, and that Damon's gone to all of this effort to do it with you guys as well as part of it. And I really do appreciate that this will be an elevation to his neshama, please God.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Amen. So we're dedicating this shir to Dov Shimon ben Tzvi Aryeh, for Barney Simon Kupovitz, and Michael might be an aliyah for his neshama, and all your good deeds obviously have a huge impact on his neshama, believe me, because he gets affected by all the ramifications of the decisions he made in his life. And obviously his children can spurn his elevation, because as a result of him, you came around. As a result of you, your learning and your good deeds have affected the world in a very positive way, and so to your children, and from then on. So to do the effort that you're doing is helping the world all around. And thank you for being part of the group, Michael. And I'm sure your dad, he's proud of you. And life isn't easy. And he knows what stresses you go through and how you're dealing with them and how you're processing. And I'm saying it's not just what you do, it's your thought process that is impressive, and how you analyze things and how you're conscientious. And these things will help your dad's neshama and certainly give him a huge sense of nachas.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you.
So, at the moment, can you see a picture of your dad in the background while I'm reading Mishnah Brura, etc.? Is your dad still there in the background?
Yes.
Okay, so I thought that rather than looking at my face, let's look at your dad and you while we're learning that portion regarding for your father. And then when we get to the Gemara share, we'll concentrate on that. And your dad is included in that learning. It's just for the sake of editing, nobody else that hasn't been following the shirim up to now would really be able to follow. So for us, it will be included in the shir, in our mindsets. But as far as you're concerned, you've got the edited versions also. So basically, we're learning by Rabbi Daniel Brody, Rabbi Gary Brody's brother, the halachas of Shechianu and Hatov Hameitiv. Okay, so I'm going to explain what this is involved with. So there are two extra brachas that you make in order to thank Hashem for his goodness, for a particular new kindness that he has done. A Shechianu is this where only one person enjoys the benefit. So for example, a person buys a fancy new suit for himself. Okay? So Hatov Hameitiv is when another person also enjoys the benefit, meaning you enjoy it and somebody else. So for example, two friends buy a holiday home together, or they go on vacation. I think it would have to be a purchase. So I think two friends buying a holiday home together would make sense. Or you could say a husband and a wife, where they would share in the benefit. And a person can make a bracha only as long as he or she is still excited and involved with the new acquisition. In other words, if you wait a period of time and it becomes, to a certain extent mundane, then you can't do it at that point. I mean, when I first got my Merc convertible, I was very excited, etc. And I didn't do a shechianu. I don't know if you can make a shechianu on a second-hand car. I bought it second-hand. But after a couple of months, whether you're driving that or Toyota, it gets you from A to B. Mankind is always looking for the next quick, exciting thing. So you must take that opportunity when you're excited and when you're full of emotion and enthusiasm to use it as the time to make a brocha. And I don't know if you guys knew, but I never knew about this hatov ve'ametiv, that if it's more than one person benefiting, that it's a different brocha. So guys, I learned something new here. Now, one point, the point I'm going to address now is a point when only one person gains versus when the other person will gain. Okay, so let me just give you an example and explain it to you. So you make a shechianu on something which only you will gain from, such as, for example, if you buy yourself a new coat. Even if subsequently you might decide to share it with family or friends, you don't make hatov ve'ametiv, since at the time of acquiring it, you bought it and received it solely for yourself. I think the better term to use, even though this was the example given here, is let's just say a car. So Michael, you buy a car, right? And at the time you did it for your mindset, and your son gets a driver's license, and by that time the car, he's ready to drive, etc. Even though you let him drive it, and you might even give it to him, at your time of purchase, that wasn't your intent. At the time of purchase, your intent was that you benefit solely. So then a shechianu is made at that point. What happens afterwards, when somebody else derives benefit as well, happens afterwards. But it's just like if you don't take the opportunity to make a brocha then, while you're still excited about the new acquisition, you still don't make a brocha. So it would be the same here. Now, if you bought or received the same item, both for yourself to use and a family partner to use, in other words, in terms of intent. So Gavin, let's take a case of you and Mark. Remember when you bought the BMW, that it was going to be for you and Mark. Yeah. I don't think Justin got his license. In that case, you do a hatov ve'ametiv, because your intention was that more than one of you benefits simultaneously. As far as I know, I've never bought a brand new car in my life. I've just never seen the point of reversing it out of the showroom and it's losing 30% value as you pull it out. I've always bought demo cars or second-hand cars that are in mint condition. The fact of it is, when it's left up to me, I'll probably ruin it after a short period of time. But be that as it may,
I don't second-hand as well, then.
Okay, so in that case, I don't think you can do a hatov ve'ametiv or shechianu. I think it would have to be new, but there would be a shala because of the cost of the car. It might warrant such a brocha. Do you know what I'm saying? As far as an item of clothing, it would have to be new, but because the value of a property or a house is not, for example, built from scratch, it's technically second-hand when you're buying your house. And a car, not everybody buys a new car. I would need to find out as far as that's concerned. All right, just let me go through one more point. If a person bought two things at the same time, one for himself and another family member, such as, for example, clothing. Like you go to Mr. Price and you buy two different items. You make a shechianu on the item that you bought for yourself. If you have a joint delight from making sure that his family's clothed, he makes a hatov ve'ametiv on the other item that he bought for them. But it has to be a major item that gives a lot of joy. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn what is included in this note. In other words, the bracha for hatov ve'ametiv. So basically, it goes Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hatov ve'ametiv, or shechianu v'higianu v'kimanu lizman hazeh. You know how the bracha goes. Now the source of this is in Brochat 59b, Gemara Brochas 59b. It's in the Mishnah Brura in section 223, and it's in the Shulchan Aruch 223. and in the Biur Halacha 223. Now, why he skipped the shir to 223 from 181, I'm not sure, but this is what email I received. I hope I've given it over in a clear way. I'm going to do the shir a quick Musa for Marco's father, because we learned from Rav Simcha Steinhauer that if you learn Mishnah Brura every day in the Gemara, you have to learn something new to elevate the neshama, because if it doesn't change your daily routine, it's not as impactful, which he learned from the late Rabbi Foifer. Okay, so just one quick thing is this jumped out at me. It's funny, Marco's father's Hebrew name was Dov Shimon, and this is written by Rav Dov Krakowski about Rabbi Shimon. So when I saw Dov Shimon, it kind of jumped at me. And we should learn Mishnayos, by the way, because the word Neshama and Mishnah have the same amount of Hebrew letters. Okay. But before we get started, I just want to invite Arthur in. I don't know, Arthur, can you hear me? Arthur?
Yeah.
How's it? Listen. So we've if you see on the screen, you can see that we're doing a shir for Mark Kupovitz's late father. It's his yortzeit. So
wish you long life.
I wish you long life, Marco. Yeah. Arthur just wishes you long life. Marco, are you there? Are you on mute?
No, thank you very much. Thanks, Arthur.
Okay. Does it look like your dad? You like that?
It does, eh?
It does, yeah.
Does
it?
What can you say?
You know you're getting on then when you start looking like your father.
Okay, so I just want to do this quick. Pardon?
Do you want me to record?
No, we're going to be doing another session of the actual Gemara share, but we're doing this as a separate part for family members of Marco and friends that aren't going to follow the Gemara share, and we're going to link it together. So I'm just going to do this for a few minutes, and then we're going to start the main Gemara sharing. All right. So this is in Pirkei Avot, chapter 4, verse 23. And this is what it says. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar used to say, "Do not appease your fellow in the time of his anger, nor comfort him while his deceased lie lying before him. Do not question him in the time of his vow, and do not try and see him in the time of his disgrace." So Rav Shimon ben Elazar is discussing head on a series of similar ethical guidelines. I mean, if you study Pirkei Avot, it obviously follows a specific conceptual theme. So the Rambam, in his commentary to this particular Mishnah, Maimonides, he is brief, and he simply states that Rav Shimon ben Elazar is instructing us regarding ethical behaviors. So both Rashi and Rabbeinu Yonah provide a bit more explanation of these recommendations. Rashi only goes as far as to say that intervening in situations mentioned in the Mishnah will meet a futile response. So again, according to Rashi, you're not going to get it very much out of the person when they're in this particular state of mind. So in other words, it's futile, it's not productive. But Rabbeinu, that's the Rambam's brief explanation, and Rashi goes the same way. But Rabbeinu Yonah takes it a step further. And what is he suggesting? He's saying it's more than the fact that it's going to be a futile response. He said it's not only that these respective interactions will be ineffective, but what he's saying is it's actually going to provoke an opposite reaction from that what's desired. What do you mean? In other words, there's 3 points of view when you have a conversation with somebody in interpersonal relationships. You can either have 1, a positive response, 2, a neutral response, or 3, a negative response. So according to the Rambam and Rashi, it would seem that the response would be futile. Somebody's in such a state of mind, you're not going to get anything productive. Rabbeinu Yonah is saying something different. He's saying it's actually destructive. Because in one instance, that, for example, like a person making a vow, the results might be even irreversible because they might make a vow now out of temper. Does that make sense? Or say something that they're going to regret, and then they're obligated, and only in Yom Kippur can they rectify it. So the Rambam's comment on this Mishnah might seem as though there's precepts or common sense. In other words, what it's saying is, when you look at Pirkei Avot on the surface, it seems like it's good advice, it's common sense, but there's obviously something deeper that's going on here. So basically, one could argue that Rav Shimon ben Elazar is telling us something relatively obvious in order to emphasize it's important. But the whole of Chazal does not state the truly obvious. So what it's trying to say is that what's the underlying theme and message? Because it's working on a singular theme here in this chapter of Pirkei Avot, this section. So the natural inclination, this is what it's saying, of a kind and caring person is to notice that when one's fellow is in distress and you want to help, that often someone in a time of need will be happy to receive help and welcome it. But there's four specific scenarios in which a person involved would not rather receive that help. Okay. And what is it that makes people in such a situation not want to be helped? So when one is, when you're in the middle of a crisis or technical difficulty, and the issue of hand is how to remedy the technical difficulty, then great, you can take that advice, and there's no need to turn it down. Why? Because it's a practical fix-up of the problem you're in. But sometimes you can't do the antidote or the partial relief unless somebody changes their mindset. In other words, what these are saying in these four cases is it's not a technical difficulty of where you can just bring a solution. That is a state of being where the person is in such a destructive state that anything that you say in front of them is actually going to get them to a state of anger, irrationality, and it's going to be counterproductive. So, for example, if somebody's lost a loved one, that's why I brought this up also, it's quite pertinent to Marco. At the time when they lose a parent, and I can tell you from my own experience, you can't come with some sort of platitude, don't worry, it's going to get better, time heals. Because when somebody says that to you, although it's well-meaning, you actually just get irritated with them. You've got to let people get to the point of mindset to be able to come to terms with their loss. There's a certain conscious acknowledgement of these respective states of being that one has to come to accept. And the appeasement and the comfort or advice can't happen until, because these are interpersonal relationships, until there's an internal, personal, almost coming to terms with the situation. And this can only be fixed internally. That's what Rabbeinu Yonah is actually trying to say. So it becomes an intrinsic struggle that can be only remedied by the person going through this alone. In other words, you can say, listen, if you need any help, I'm here for you. Just know I love you, I care about you, I'm here for you. When you want to talk, let me know. Often just the fact that they know that you're there to comfort, support, and appease them will give them strength to that person in a negative situation. But sometimes they got to go through this gamut of process of emotions, from anger to disbelief to rejection to acceptance, and it takes time. So you've got to have the intuition to know sometimes when your advice is not needed. All right. So, I mean, for example, women work differently to men. Many times a woman will turn around to her husband and say, listen, I've got this problem. And then first thing the guy will turn around and say, yeah, well, why don't you do such and such? And it'll irritate her because she didn't want a solution. What she wanted is somebody just to listen to her and to understand that she was going through a difficult period of time. Men are much more practical in certain regards, but men are also emotional because at certain times, if somebody's in a state of anger, you never go to them and say, listen, the way you dealt with that person, you just got the worst out of them. They're going to blow their anger on you. So you say, you just keep quiet, you let them calm down, and when everybody's emotions have settled down, you say, okay, let's see what we can do to sort this out. And then they're at a reasonable point. So Rav Shimon ben Elazar's advice is proverbial, but it goes beyond simple advice And it reflects that a deep understanding of human nature is not how to read the situation. So, Michael, we wish you long life. And I want to thank you for this share.
Thank you for organizing it, Dan.
All right.
Thanks for extra time, guys.
All right. Thank you, guys, everybody, for that extra time for the Gemara show, which we're about to do. And I hope you know no more sorrow, Michael. And please, God, I hope this is an aliyah for your dad's neshama. Thanks, guys. We'll log on right now to the Gemara show.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well done, Dan. Thanks.
Ciao.